My name is Justin Gage, and you're tuned in to the Aquarium Drunkard Transmissions podcast with your host, Jason Woodbury.
Welcome back. Today on the show, I'm joined by Anika Henderson, who records under the name Anika. Known for her collaborations with Shackleton, Geoff Barrow of Portishead, and the Mexico City-based avant rock band Exploded View, her first solo outing was 2010's self-titled LP Anika, which featured deconstructed and intriguing covers of songs by Bob Dylan, Yoko Ono, The Kinks, and more. Her new record is called Change. It blends electronic textures and live drums and bass, with her voice hovering over it all, delivering lyrics that are sometimes quixotic but often inspiring, putting it in line with prime material by groups like Broadcast and Stereolab. We interacted earlier this year. She contributed some thoughts to a piece I wrote about thought forms, a book from the Theosophical Society that her label Sacred Bones republished. And I knew after that back and forth that we needed to have her stop by Transmissions for a full conversation about her days as a journalist and her musical worldview. So here's that conversation, but before that, a brief word from our sponsor. Do you dread looking at your credit card statements? If so, you're not alone. So many Americans experienced financial hardship in the last year, but Upstart can help you get back on track. Upstart is the fast and easy way to pay off your debt with a personal loan, all online. Upstart knows you're more than just a credit score. They consider your income and current employment to find you a smarter rate for your loan. Find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments today when you go to upstart.com/aquariumdrunkard. That's upstart.com/aquariumdrunkard. Don't forget to use our URL to let them know we sent you. Loan amounts will be determined based on your credit, income, and other information provided in your loan application. Go to upstart.com/aquariumdrunkard.
Afraid of you. It's pushed me apart. Writing is useless. My intention. You gave me the push.
Anika, thanks so much for taking the time to join us here on Aquarium Drunkard's Transmissions. It's a real honor to have you here.
Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
It's so you're in Berlin, right?
Yeah, kind of. Well, I'm in Brandenburg, which is about an hour and a half out. So yeah, I moved here before Corona, like 2 years ago or something. But I'm trying to move. I'm trying to move back to Berlin. It's not far, and I go every week anyway to do stuff. So yeah.
Sure. Well, congrats on this great new album. Change is really fascinating, and I've really been enjoying listening to it. It's been like 11 years since your last solo album. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Well, there was the EP in between, and yeah, so it's been a while. It took my time.
You were obviously very, very busy with other projects, and you worked with Exploded View and other things. But what signaled for you that it was time to, return to making music under your own name?
I was just waiting till I really had something to say, and it took a long time. Like even with the Exploded View stuff, I had something to say there, and with all the collaborations for sure, but it was in a different way, and also I felt like I needed to learn a lot of stuff. So I did a lot of collaborations with people I really admire, and in sort of environments where I could learn something from each person I collaborated with. So that was great. It was like having lots of private teachers and hopefully I gave them something too. Normally they learn how to deal with a it's like wild cannon sometimes, but some of them it was a little bit stressful maybe, but no, but it was so that's what I did in between.
Yeah. Well, I really like the title track, Change. And, so much of the music that, for better or, well, a lot of the music that's, let's say, coming out of the pandemic, which is not really over, but in some ways the first wave of it feels, or not the first wave, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's sort of over, but mostly not over, but still sort of over, however we want to define the weird liminal thing that we're in.
I think for everyone's mental health, everyone's pretending it's over, and I think we kind of need to believe it for a little bit, just so that we, everyone gets a little bit sane again. And then we see, and I think everyone's got so used to living with it, and we just see, I mean, it's like with booking tours. I'm putting together a band, and I have no idea whether it's going to happen or how hard it's going to be to get across borders, and it's a very strange time to be organizing stuff.
Yeah, no kidding. But so much of the music that's come out of the last year and a half has been pretty fraught and kind of bleak, at least some of it, But what I really appreciate about Change is how it doesn't those descriptions don't really apply, especially to that song. I find Change to be a very hopeful song, and the notion that we can change, not just on individual levels, but maybe even on societal levels, To me, that's such an interesting and striking point to make, especially right now where it's not easy, it's not difficult to feel weighed down or bogged down by the intensity of the last year and a half. I wonder, what was it about that song that sort of indicated to you that this is the title track for this project?
Because I think all the songs were about this, it was about this transformation year in so many ways. It wasn't just Corona. There were just so many themes going on. Everyone had their own battle, and it was, we saw things like Brexit happening, and the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, and the environmental movements. There was so much going on where suddenly it was like, oh shit, this just, what do we do? Or why is this all happening? Or why is it all coming out now? And it felt like, it is a change time, and change can be good, and I think when these things happen, it's important not to be sort of beaten down by the fear narratives, and to actually see that these are opportunities to actually improve things, and change for the better, and that actually we are the writers of the future. We're not just passive consumers. It's such an important time to be writing what we want to come next, and what we want to feel these spaces that are happening, because Corona did kill off a lot of things. I mean, sorry, that's a really bad taste of language to use, because sadly it also killed off people, which was an extremely sad time, and that shows how our healthcare systems and how much the wealth gap has just increased in this time, and it's insane. That it was to show who has access to healthcare and services like that, and who doesn't, and who can carry on living a life, and who was, the majority of people, it was a life-changing event, and for a small minority, it seemed like nothing really changed, which is
right.
Which is a reality check, I think, for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously I don't want to paint the album as if it's just this sort of like hopeful anthem or whatever, because there are things where you're playing around with maybe a little bit of what you're talking about. I think about Finger Pies and how, the lyric is, you're only interested in one thing. And I think that there's something, I mean, the language is ambiguous enough that it can mean a lot of things. And I love that, but But I feel like this album is grappling, obviously, with the complexity of the way the world is looked. But I was surprised to read that a lot of these lyrics were written more or less on the spot. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's how I often write anyway. I have I mean, it doesn't come from nowhere. You know, I was writing diaries every day. When I
Sure.
know I want to write, I get into then writing habits. So I write every day like a diary just to get you get into the practice, you know, and then I just went to the studio with the box of papers, and I remember the studio guy was like, "Where are your instruments?" And I was just like turned up with a box of scrunched up paper and was like, "No, this is all I need." So you know, it was it's that's that, and then you just dive in there and just reappropriate things. You know, it kind of gives you something to bounce against. It's like bouncing against the past version of yourself, and that's because when you're writing solo, that's one thing that I find difficult. You know, you often, I feel like I have to write one part of the song or one mood, and then I go back to it with a different mood, and you have to play like the different roles in the band, you know, like and kind of bounce against yourself. So with lyrics, it's really useful to do it like that, because you kind of, you have, yeah, like your past self, and now you're coming with your present self, and you're like, okay, we're gonna have a conversation now. So
Yeah, that's an interesting way to approach things. I mean, is it a thing where is it sort of stressful in the moment to compose, even if you're using sort of elements of things you've previously written? You know, do you find it sort of stressful, or is it more of a situation where it is galvanizing or energizing to be in a position?
yeah, well, with lyrics, they really come. I have to. It's all about setting up the right environment, and then I like switch off. Like I'm not even writing. You know, it's really weird situation. I mean, this is why I was looking a lot into things like David Leary and the you know, how a lot of these scientists were using drugs to get to certain places. And I think that music can sometimes get you to certain states of consciousness that you know, that a lot of drugs can too. And I feel like when I'm writing lyrics, this is often the way. You know, I've had very strange experiences where in Exploded View, where I ended up writing the lyrics about you know, just people in the room or issues I had, just but unconsciously, you know. And it's like there's a line and it just comes. I don't know, it's just a weird thing. It's probably the German passive aggressiveness that's been stored up, and it just suddenly unlocks it, and it just comes flowing out, but I am completely blank, like my head is not there, you know, but and the words are just coming. Because there was a song, I can't remember which one it is. I think it's Killjoy. And it was actually, it's about Martin from Exploded View, who I love dearly. And he helped me write this album. And at the time, we didn't get on so well. And it was really pissing me off, actually. And this song is because I wrote an ad for Astronaut, and all I got was a man of zero thought. Why do you insist on? I can't even remember the words now, but it was a little dig at Martin, because he kept disrupting my mind and kept, like, with his guitar playing, kept toppling me out of this unconscious state that I wanted to be in, you know. So he would often play kind of high-end guitar riffs that were really attention seeking, and I'd be like, stop it, you're disrupting my meditative state. And so which sounds kind of weird, but anyway, so this song, it wasn't, like I said, I didn't consciously dig at him. It was only after that I was like, oh, okay, that's what was going on there then, you know.
Yeah. Do you often find yourself somewhat surprised by looking back at what you have written or sung and think to yourself, like, wow, that's not something I even was necessarily aware that was maybe in my head?
Yeah, definitely. That's what I mean, that's how it started. When I was first writing songs, I did it for myself, and it was a way to let things out. And you know, I'm full of these emotions and I don't really understand them. And then writing music is a way to often I'd look down at the words and I'd be like, oh, that's what I was annoyed about. I didn't realize. It's very strange.
Did Martin ever pick up on the lyrics, or is he going to be listening to this
No,
podcast
he
and
knows.
find
He
out?
knows. He knows. It's and I also wrote a song called Beige, and it was Swedish beige, and it was like, well, it was all in jest. It was never like anything mean. But and he knows, and we're really good friends, so it's fine. We've yeah.
You two work together on Change as well, right?
Yeah, on the album. Yeah, he luckily it worked out actually, because I was writing on my own, it being locked down and everything, and it was a bit of a weird situation. And originally I was hoping to go to Bristol to record there because I'd written the songs, and I was like, oh, I could just go there. And then with Corona it was impossible, and so I was sort of, and also, I'd written these songs, but I didn't really get them, and a lot of other people didn't really get them. So, and I know, I've worked with Martin so long that he kind of gets me where I'm at. So I sent them to him and was like, what do you reckon? I feel like these are the ideas I want to do. And somehow it was clear. I don't know why. It was a very strange thing. Anyway, he said, oh yeah, it sounds good. I'd be up for, because I wanted him to play live drums and to co-produce, and he was up for it. So, and somehow made it to Europe. So that was good.
From Mexico City, while the pandemic was happening.
Yeah, well, the thing is, he was originally meant to come in May when I did the initial recording session, but he couldn't. It was impossible to travel, and then he managed to. He was recording an album with a friend of his in Sweden in August or something, and visiting his parents. So somehow he managed to get over, and he was there for a month. And then I said, oh, are you still up for helping me with this album? And he said, yeah, okay. So I found a studio by a lucky recommendation from a friend, and we just booked it, and we're like, right, let's do this. And he spent a week here, and we were just chopping up the songs and replacing some of my bad sounds and stuff. So yeah.
Well, it turned out so great. It's so rhythmically propulsive, and your vocals are so haunting and work against those rhythms in such cool ways. It's a really killer album.
Cool. Yeah.
So as I understand, you grew up, your brother was super into hip hop and drum and bass, and your sister was into jungle and house music. Obviously there's such a rhythmic core to this album. It's not any of those genres, but it certainly, rhythm is a big part of everything that you've done. Growing up, what was it like hearing that stuff coming out of their bedrooms? And do you remember, is that some of your first sort of memories of music?
Yeah, definitely. That was, I grew up just outside of London, so there was so much music going on, and having like an older brother and sister, I used to go and steal her rave t-shirts while she was out and try on her platforms and stuff. And it was like, there was always something with my brothers. All his little grime mates would come over and start emceeing, and because he had decks and a DJ set up in his room. I remember he saved up a long time to buy those with like a paper round or something. I actually still have those decks. That was pretty cool. He lent them to me. So there was a lot of music, and growing up near to London, there was a good source. There was also a good vinyl store in where I grew up, in a place called Woking, and they had a lot of white labels. So sort of, before stuff was released. And I don't know if that's still a thing, like white labels, it's when you don't even, they sort of hand make them and stuff. But anyway, so there was just like a lot of just so much music, and so it's easier being the younger one, because you just sort of you have to be quicker at growing up, because everyone expects you to already be grown up because everyone else is grown up. So it's like, so you speed learn by watching everyone else. So that's music wise, that was great, because compared to my friends who were all listening to like Bewitched or something, I was already on I don't know, speed garage and whatever jungle. So
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was
How much
yeah.
how much older are your siblings than you?
My sister's 8 years older than me, and my brother's 2 years older than me. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So with 8 years, I mean that's a substantial difference. So she
Definitely,
must
yeah.
have seemed so grown up, and yeah.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself interested in electronic music pretty obviously you heard all this stuff and then
Yeah.
sort of made your way into it. How did you start to get involved in music yourself?
Well, that was the thing. I remember it was around the time when a lot of these programs were coming around, like Cubase, and even you had these really basic versions like Fruity Loops and stuff. And I remember my
I remember
brother,
Fruity
yeah,
Loops,
my
yeah.
brother got all these things. So I remember making stuff on Fruity Loops, and he started making beats, and I was trying stuff. And there was like this dance EJ and like all these sort of weird free, or I don't know if they were free, but he somehow got them on floppy disk or something. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, so there was that. And then but I used to always do it in secret because I was way too shy. And anyway, I was the young one, so I wasn't the one doing it. It was like my brother's thing or my sister's thing, you know what I mean? So
Sure.
yeah, so I don't know. So I just used to borrow his guitar when he was out and write songs, and that's how I started writing. But I always did it in private and secret, and not really because I was too shy. So then it happened totally
Ha-
by accident. I don't even remember.
well, so yeah, because that's that thing that shyness is obviously something that I've read in a lot of interviews from you. You talk about how very often you don't even intend necessarily to release the music that sometimes has been, released. There's always been sort of a private, personal side of it for you.
I don't know. No, it's more. I think it wasn't so much that the music was private, but I think the music was somehow a necessity or it was an experiment thing, Whereas it's
Mm.
I like the investigation of trying to figure stuff out, and like I say, I grew up, and from a young age I got used to learning from people stuff, and I saw how cool it is actually to listen and observe others and learn from them. Like I think a lot of people, they don't like that situation because they find it passive or not, like they haven't got the power in the room, but actually you can learn so much just from observing and seeing what's going on. So it's like, and that's what I love with the music stuff, because I was often thrown in these situations. I mean, I did, I also made them myself. I was a journalist, writing at university, and then I started putting on shows, and I started managing bands, and I set up a little DIY label, and just because I loved music, and everyone was just like, and it was a pain in the backside, it was like hard work, and I didn't sleep. I had insomnia for like I don't know how long, and it was a total wreck. So I quit. But I don't know. So these situations came from just working in what I love and meeting people and just keep learning and figuring stuff out. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's also one of the things of maybe it's about being a female in the music industry or a female in the world. I don't know. Or maybe it's just a personal thing, but I always felt like I didn't know enough, to do stuff, or to have the right to do stuff, which is actually
Sure.
rubbish because most people do it when they don't know anything about it. But I didn't figure that out until later. Often people
Right.
would,
That
yeah.
that everybody's faking it. Nobody has any idea what they're doing most of the
Exactly.
time.
Yeah, and it's such a con, like there's so many times that people are like, yeah, and I remember this from there was a situation, even things like, because I taught myself to do a lot of things, like graphic design, and I was doing it at the venues and started redesigning their stuff, and the chef wanted to go off and set up his own restaurant, and he was like asking me to do the logo. So I did it, but I'd never studied graphic design, so I was like, oh, I'm not really sure, and I did it, and then I said, oh, okay, yeah, I suppose you better finish it because I don't think I'm, I don't think mine is good enough. And so he never paid me. He took my logo and used it for his whole franchise. And I remember my friend who saw, she remembers when I was sat there like designing it on our in our lounge or whatever, and she was like, "Yeah, that restaurant is is there everywhere now, and I can't believe you never got paid." But it was because I handed it over, just being like, "Oh, I don't really know, and I don't think it's good enough, or maybe it's not really done properly, you know." And it's this annoying thing of just being, maybe it's about being female or just being, growing up in that environment where I didn't go to private school and I haven't learned how to just be totally self-assured, but
Sure.
in a way that's been interesting, because now I spent like the last 12 years exploring the world and learning from a lot of people, and it's pretty cool. And I'm definitely not done yet, so
No, of course. Yeah, yeah. Do you find, I mean, that the thing you've mentioned about being a woman, there's the video you did for Rights is really incredible. With your co-director Sabrina, I think Labis is how you would maybe say it.
Yeah.
But you talk, I mean, it comes sort of with this like an artist statement of intent, and you talk about you have rights, and how often as a woman you feel like that is glossed over or unacknowledged. And when I hear you talking about this thing, this sort of this feeling of like, well, maybe I don't know enough, I just think about how, the act of making things and creating things, there's so much intuition involved in it. And I wonder if just has the process of making things helped you over time just feel like able to let go of some of that shyness or that reserve, do you feel more confident as you've continued creating things in various shapes and in various forms?
Yeah, no, I don't know, in a way, but then yeah, someone once told me something about, when you're a musician, you have to learn to swim, because you learn to swim around the framework, that exists in society.
Right.
And I think this is quite accurate, because in the real world, I'm still at square one, not the real world, but in the constructed worlds, I'm still at square one. In the real world, I'm at like 1 million, but in the constructed world, I'm like 0.1 on the scale. I don't own my own house.
Yeah.
I don't have many things that other people have. So but yeah, that's the thing, so I think you have to get used to that, and like I say, yeah, you have to learn to be a fish. Luckily I'm Aquarius, so that's okay, I can deal with that. But sometimes sometimes it is difficult, when again someone says, "Oh, don't worry, it's not too late for you to get a real job," kind of thing. I'm like, all right, thanks. It's not too late for you either, when you're gonna quit being a lawyer, but yeah, it's difficult.
Well, I wanna talk to you about journalism a little bit, but before that, I really would like to. So we spoke about, or we emailed about a great book that your label Sacred Bones reissued called Thought Forms, which is this theosophical sort of manual that's about seeing the color and shape of thoughts. And so when you're talking about the difference between sort of the manufactured world versus the real world, in quotes, which is sort of the manufactured world, and then these deeper, more expansive concepts of existence that you believe music allows you to get to. I mean, I wonder if you could it doesn't sound like you're afraid to engage in I guess people would call it like, woo thinking or anything like that. And neither am I, but I'm curious about what it is that you're talking about there when you use these sort of terms to define the existence that everybody sort of accepts as the standard operating procedure versus maybe these more these other sort of frameworks that music allows you to access personally. Gosh, that was a mouthful, and I didn't
Yeah,
really,
no,
I
it's
didn't.
yeah, no, it's a complex topic, but yeah, I mean, just to firstly point out, I do appreciate the luxury of my job, and one thing
Yeah,
that it's clear, everyone in society plays their part, if and I'm lucky to have my job. It's not the easiest job, and I think a lot of people couldn't handle it, because of the uncertainty and stress and whatever. But just to point out that I'm not discrediting other people's jobs, because everyone plays a role, and I use that system. I have electricity that comes through my wires, and I eat food that is, I exist within this world.
yeah,
But I'm lucky enough to be someone that somehow manages to be a scientist as well, or an explorer slash scientist, musician type person. Um, and figuring stuff out, maybe testing the limits of humanity. I mean, that's why we're obsessed with space and beyond, and robots now, because robots are beyond our limits. They're now going into the beyond, so and
yeah,
as a musician, I like to still test the limits of humans and of our, and also not just that, but then also use music as a way to bring people together, because sometimes in these quests for going further and further away from everyone else, or competing with everyone else, it can get a little bit isolated or aggressive, nations and different cultures. So I think music is a nice thing to bring everyone together,
right,
facilitate understanding and things.
yeah. So you worked as a journalist, a political journalist. Was that your beat?
Yeah, but only for a bit. I mean, I went into music pretty soon, so I mean, that was what I kind of wanted to do, and I was working in Berlin as a political journalist, but only temporarily, because then I decided to go into music. But that was what I wanted to work in. I wanted to work in policy development, actually, and then I decided to do music.
Yeah. Did you like journalism?
Well, I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make a change, and I wanted to write about people. And I always found documentaries really interesting, because you can, again, it's this observing other people and facilitating understanding thing. I love to make documentaries about groups that people often saw as this weird monolithic alien, and make them more human, as a way to actually say, look, these people that you feel like you can't relate to, actually they're not that different from you. And I think this is important, because one of even with things like in the army or killing people, often one of the tactics to make humans, or to help kill someone else, is by dehumanizing your enemy, and
Yeah, you have to, right? You have to do that in order to not
it's often
hate the process.
yeah, and it's done through like playing computer games and stuff like that, and it's ways to, you have to dehumanize, and this is often throughout history, ways to justify doing really just horrible things, whether it was in World War II and dehumanizing a whole population, or culture, religion, and how that, by doing that, it enables people to go beyond their morals, because they no longer see that as a person. And
Right.
I think that's something that is so important in, that was always one thing that I thought documentaries were really good at, as a vehicle to actually show that people are people, and I feel like I have the same possibility in music. So that was pretty cool, really.
Yeah. Do you talked about how you feel like as an artist, a lot of what you've done is hang out with people and observe and listen and learn, from them. Do you feel like all of that ties back to some of the skills that you did learn as a journalist?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it makes you it definitely meant I was quicker to get the information I need to. I mean, the thing is, when you're making music, you're also on the chopping block. It's not like you're just observing, taking
Right.
notes. It's like, especially if you don't know what you're doing or you think you don't, and you're like drowning in the situation, then most of the time is spent just trying to avert or a panic attack, and it's not like it I was in boiling water for the first 8 years, I think, of this career. It was just finally I managed, like this little lobster crawled out the pot, finally, after 8 years. But
Yeah.
it was definitely the journalists that embed themselves in the full thing. But no, but it's it's I don't know. It has similarities, but then it's a whole different thing. It's a I don't know.
Yeah. When we talked about thought forms, you talked pretty eloquently about fake news and about the way we sometimes are willing to convince ourselves of things or to build cases around. It's this thing that I don't know how familiar you are with QAnon here in the United States. It's this thing where people can build a very convincing, internally convincing framework for themselves. And now it obviously doesn't stand up to much outside pressure, because so much of it is obvious nonsense. But I've found myself maybe a little bit. I've found myself personally examining the idea that even though QAnon is sure this thing of complete, goofy, paranoid, delusional type stuff, the way they build their argument is really not that different than the way anybody builds an argument, or convinces themselves of something. And I really do feel like people have decided that they're, as we're all able to make our own worlds and as we are disconnected from each other, I think it's going to be interesting to see what kind of reality tunnels people build. And I think that there's some usefulness in recognizing that, like, the way a QAnon person builds their framework is not all that different than the way anybody who wants to build a framework with a pre-established goal in mind goes about doing it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And I feel like we're in this weird thing where the kind of connection that you're talking about, music potentially having the ability to connect us, we're going to need a lot of tools that allow for that kind of connection, because we see that the more we are off in our own kind of like singular spaces, we see what kind of things can develop, both good and bad.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, no, it's completely. Somehow, I don't know why I want to mention it, but I remember, one of the films that I found really fascinating when I was growing up. There were two. There was this one called, I think, like Time Machine or something. And this that was a little bit similar to then Planet of the Apes, like the original one with Charlton Heston or whoever it was in it.
Oh yeah, classic.
And it was just like this concept, like as a kid, just being like, yeah, that's true. Maybe there is a parallel universe where apes are actually in charge. But it's this thing of, we believe what we believe because it's always been that way, but it could all be rubbish. And that's the power of information and again, it was a very powerful tool in Nazi Germany, where it was a way of controlling people, and information is an extremely powerful tool, and it's also a powerful distraction tool, which is, I think, a lot of the conspiracy theory stuff that's been going on. I think one of the most dangerous things about it is that it can really divert attention from stuff that is really going on, and
Sure.
it's kind of like throwing little bird seeds out, and all the birds are flocking around that, and then in the meantime they're burning down the birdhouse. You know what I mean? It's just it feels like, yeah, it's actually quite strong here in Germany too, with the QAnon people, and or Querdenken it's called here, and there's I know a lot of friends whose parents are actually now in this group, and a lot of the hippie generation, funnily enough, because especially in Germany, where they were really taught to question everything, don't believe anything, because they were the children of, like, the Nazi generation. So they grew up saying, no, I don't believe anything the government says, and a lot of them are anti-vaxxers. And it's because they've been brought up in this way where they don't trust the government with anything, and suddenly it's like you have this weird situation where you have the hippies are, inadvertently aligning themselves with the far right. And it's like, how did this happen? And it's extremely, and it's extremely dangerous, because at the moment, I think it's a time when, if anything, people have to unite against the far right movements that are happening. Sadly, the far right are a lot cleverer when it comes to getting together. They're like, oh, I don't care who you hate, as long as you hate someone, let's get together, kind of thing. And it's and that's sadly the on the other side, it can get a bit more complicated, and then it becomes more like, oh no, but I only like a certain shade of blue or something, and or whatever. You end up fighting about these little details, and you get the left fighting the left, and this gets a little bit complicated, and it can and sometimes these little fires are actually started by the opposition. Again, it's a distraction technique. It's like, oh, we can just plant a few little things over there, and that'll keep them distracted.
Sure.
Yeah, but I agree that you should always question things. I think it's really important to do that, especially when things are seen as everyone says, oh, but that's just the way it is. That's something that should, things need to be questioned. I think in terms of the when people were saying that corona was made up, and doctors were tweeting saying, if you really believe that, just come visit me at work and see that we are all haven't slept in a year because we've been working 24/7, like trying to save people's lives. I think this is there are lines, and there's this thing where I don't know. I don't really
know.
Yeah.
I know. I completely know. I agree, and you're right. Like, there's what we're facing right now globally with something like climate change. It is really a threat that should be faced by everybody, because everybody is involved. And yet, clearly we know that's people will go to great lengths to build frameworks to sometimes avoid seeing things, and like you said, in terms of distraction, that all is wrapped up in it. But the question of of challenging the established narratives, there's obviously a part of us that, I remember in the early days of coronavirus, the early days of the pandemic, I had this immense optimism that things were going to change dramatically, that faced with something so indiscriminately opposed to human life, we were all going to band together and we were going to look at things differently. And at least I'm talking here in America, lots of things happened, but that didn't happen. You know what I mean? Like,
there was a lot of, I mean, there was just some certain things that did happen that were just outrageous. You know, the fact is, okay, everyone started buying even more on Amazon, and then it showed how Amazon pretty much avoids tax in every country that it operates in. It's just, it's
right.
insane, you know, that these things happen, and that how did we get here, in the words of Talking Heads.
Yeah.
But
well, I'm glad you brought the Talking Heads up, because we probably could talk a little bit more about music too, as opposed to QAnon. But I was gonna ask you, your record from 2010 is such a great album. And I was thinking about how, I mean, there, you know, you've got these great covers on that one, songs by Yoko Ono and Bob Dylan and the Kinks. You've also, I was like digging around and just looking for interesting stuff, and you covered 99 Red Balloons with the Invada All-Stars, which is, I've always loved that song, and your version of it is so cool and so heady. I love it. It's a really good version. I wonder if the difference, what's the difference for you in terms of interpreting others' lyrics as opposed to sort of writing your own? Is there is that an interesting thing to do, to sort of like step into somebody else's words versus writing your own?
Yeah, definitely. Because it's, in the end, you know, it's just like wearing clothes, isn't it? And you appropriate them for your own, you put your own meaning behind them, and that can be nice. I mean, in the same way, like I said, that now often when I write, I usually interact with my past self, and that's what you're doing when you're using someone else's lyrics. You're kind of like, you know, you're going back to something and reappropriating it for your needs.
Yeah.
You know, because I think to do both at the same time can work, but it's a different thing somehow. Yeah, so no, it's definitely interesting. And with the 99 Red Balloons, that was a very last minute. We did it in I don't know, like half a day or something. It was for a anti-Trident song, because at the time Trident was a missile that the English government were spending all their money on, and there was a campaign against it. So we did this song, and all the money went to this anti-Trident campaign. So that was the thing behind that one. I mean, I probably wouldn't have covered it otherwise. It's but for that, I was like, okay, we can do
it. Worked. Yeah.
I let it go. But it was yeah. But it's definitely, you know, I love that about people like Billie Holiday, when she covers certain songs that a lot of the other artists at the same time were singing. And it's like, she sings them so differently, you know, even just by emphasizing certain words. And it's like, okay, you know, it's you can totally make it something different. Depends what you want to say, you know. So yeah.
When you know, and then there's stuff like the Masters of War cover on that. There's a dub version, and it's like, to hear just the sort of snippets of the lyrics recontextualized and sort of echoing around in that sort of more classic dub fashion. To me, there's something really interesting about that as well, because it almost feels like it's like half heard or overheard, you know? There's some distance between the lyrics as filtered through all these effects, but in a weird way that makes me that much more interested in what you're saying, you know? And I think about how that use of distance and effect plays into what you do.
Yeah, well, definitely with the first album, it was so much reverb and everything else going on.
There's some of that is sort of stripped back on this new one. Did you want to have a little bit more of a direct approach?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think because the lyrics are my lyrics, and I like I said, I have something to say, and it was important to me
Yeah.
this time,
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely, it's just different, it depends what you're doing. But I do know,
So
yeah, I love a bit of space echo, obviously.
So how did you? I'm curious how you met Geoff Darrow, who you worked with on the first one, and when you met him, didn't know he was a member of Portishead? Is that right?
Yeah, no, I didn't. Yeah, no, it was weird with that whole thing. Was very strange. I feel like sometimes it's always odd when you look back and you're like, that was, I don't even know how that happened. But yeah, no, I'd been working as a promoter in Cardiff, which is about an hour from Bristol, in Wales. And most of the good bands used to only go to Bristol. Some used to go to Cardiff, but and I was booking in Cardiff, and I was learning, like a friend of mine in Bristol was helping me out because he ran a venue there, and he was like showing me the ropes. Because actually, I was hired as a PR person, but the venues were like,
Okay.
they stopped doing music, and I was like, how do you want me to promote when there's no music? Then they were like, okay, well, and then I said, well, I can do shows, and they're like, yeah, if you think you can, then do it. So I was like, all right. So then I learned how to do shows from this friend in Bristol, and in exchange I used to do his graphic design, like in the middle of the night whilst repping the shows. And he used to go out with a good friend of mine from journalism, so I used to go visit them quite a lot and go to shows and things. He was the only one that knew that I sort of sung a little bit, or because I had really bad insomnia when I did this job, mostly because I was working until 7 or 6. I don't know, it wasn't that bad, maybe 5 in the morning or something, but then I had to be at work at 10 again, so I was like, all right, what's going to happen in between? I don't know. So I had really bad insomnia. I couldn't sleep, so I used to just play guitar. Like I bought a €10 or £10 guitar and used to just play these weird loop patterns as a way to calm my brain and write to it, because I was going through so much at the time. It was like my head was so confused. So I wrote stuff down, and but I wasn't in a band. I had friends in a band and they were like the band people, and I was just the one that was, putting on the shows or something. And I once told my lyrics to a friend of mine in a band, and I said, oh, I wrote this kind of poem type thing. I think it's kind of a song. And it was officer. And I remember saying it to him, and he was like, what is that? He's like, that's not a song. And then it made it onto the album, and that was funny. So
yeah.
Anyway, but so no one really knew. And then I used to stay at their house. They used to get up really late because they just never, and I was already awake at 7, so I just used to play their guitar that was in the lounge, and I didn't know anyone heard, but they did. So he knew that I did this, and he was the one that gave my contact to Geoff, saying I was some weird like German singer or something. I was like, what? Anyway, and so then I got a call from Geoff the day I quit my job. Actually, it was very, like, the whole thing is hilarious. And he phoned me just before my meeting with the bosses, and it was just this weird guy on the phone, like saying, "Oh, hi, yeah, Mick gave me your number," and I was like, "Yeah, I've got a meeting. Can I call you back later?" Didn't know who it was. And so after I quit my job, I was like, well, I might as well just phone this guy back, because I was feeling a little bit low, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? I just quit my job, it's a recession, what am I going to do? I was stupid. Anyway, but so I called this guy back, and he was trying to explain who this band was, and I was looking around on MySpace, and he said something about Beep or Beak or something, and I couldn't find them because they're so obtuse that they put a weird sign in their name. So I found like the New Zealand Beak. There was another one. I didn't find them. So but he was like, oh, if you're ever in Bristol, give me a call, or like send me a text, and come to the studio, or like come by the studio. And I was like, yeah, I've got nothing really to do in a few weeks because I just quit my job. So I went to Bristol, and he picked me up from the station in his, like, at the time he had this really rubbish space wagon that was like, sort of a mum's space wagon. Like when I knew Geoff, he always had the worst cars, like just the biggest piece of like trash. And he turned up in like this like mum's space wagon type thing, and was like, oh yeah, I used to have I think he only passed his test quite late, I think. Anyway, so we went to the studio, and we were just talking about the music industry, and I was really mad at my bosses and at the industry, and I was like, oh, I'm put on good shows and no one comes, and then I book the same shitty DJ every Saturday and it fills the house, and the bosses wouldn't give me a pay rise, and I hate the world. And he was like, yeah, same here. And then we got, and then we made an album by mistake. But I remember seeing the Brit Awards in the studio, because the studio was like it was like a garage in the middle of a parking council estate, whatever. And with just an Iceland, which is just like a really bad supermarket where it just has frozen stuff. And this was, so, it wasn't like a fancy place. So I turned up and I was like, oh, it's right. I trust him because it's Mig's friend. And it was just a bunch of bearded guys, and they're like, all right, do you want a cup of tea? And I was like, oh, okay. And I saw a Brit Award on the side, but I obviously thought it was a fake one, because I was like, oh, I didn't go with that.
That's amazing.
And it was only a lot later that I finally found, I think it was, my friend, like a few weeks later, was like, oh, it's Geoff from Portishead, Ryan. I was like, what? Oh, that was funny. But I think that was why it worked, because I didn't want to be a singer, and I didn't really I just had nothing to do, I was just unemployed and was like, and angry at the industry, and here's someone that I can bitch to about that, and it's something to do, and there's tea, that was about it.
Yeah, but that was enough to sort of start everything in motion, it sounds like.
Yeah. No, they were cool guys, and it was just nice to, it was just it was just a nice bunch of people, and we, with the songs, we just used to hang out just drinking tea and on YouTube looking for different songs, and then we'd go away in the evening just looking through stuff and bring in songs and say like, oh, look what I found, go down the YouTube rabbit hole, and then we'd print out the lyrics and try, and then that would be it. So yeah.
So you mentioned that you're in the process of putting a band together. Have you already started, rehearsals or anything like that? And how has it felt how do you envision these songs from Change sort of presenting live?
We start rehearsals next week. So actually wait, no, what is it? Oh yeah, next week. Yeah. So and originally I wrote this album thinking that I wouldn't get a chance to play it live. So I wrote it in a very different way, and I thought it would be a record that would be good on headphones. That was kind of my idea. But I think, I think it would be a cool album to play live, but I never really thought of that. So it's a little bit complicated because there's quite a few keyboards, for example. So I need a keyboard player with about 10 hands. But apart from that, no, I think it would be good. And this time it's a girl band. So I've put together a girl band because I wanted to change, to drop the album again. And I think it was important, I think somehow, I wanted to stand behind what I say, and I thought, why not? And I found some extremely great musicians, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. It's quite a new experience, so I don't know.
Well, I can't wait to hear how these songs take shape live, and like I said, I've enjoyed listening to this record so much, and I really appreciate you taking the time to explain it to me and speak with me about it. It's a real treat. Thank you for doing so.
Yeah, no, thanks for the interview as well. It's good to talk.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll speak again some other time. And in the meantime, stay safe and enjoy playing these songs live.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, hopefully next year I'll make it to the States. That is the plan. So we see. So Canada and the US. Fingers crossed.
Well, fingers crossed everything's going to stay safe enough for everybody to do this. I know I miss shows, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. same. I miss playing shows. Yeah.
Well, Anika, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And like I said, this record's great. The videos are great. The whole presentation, it's really fantastic. And it's been a real treat digging in with you. Thank you.
Nice one. Yeah, thanks. Have a good one. Speak soon.
In the same way we could have changed it. In the same way we could have changed it. People don't change, that's what they say. People don't change, that's what they say.
Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jason Woodbury. I write, host, and produce Transmissions. Our audio is edited by Andrew Horton. Sarah Goldstein and Jonathan Mark Walls make visuals for the show. Our executive producer is Justin Gage, AD founder and main man. He's on the air every Wednesday night. Tune into Sirius XMU at 7 p.m. California time for the Aquarium Drunkard Show. If you dig Transmissions, please leave us a rating and a review. It helps new people find the show. And if you want to support our project even more, you can find us on Patreon. We'll be back next Wednesday with another strange talk for our strange times, joined by bassist Melvin Gibbs. It's a great talk. I hope you'll tune in. Until then, this has been Transmissions.